According to the American Psychological Association, every year an estimated 4 million older adults are victims of physical, psychological, or other forms of abuse and neglect. About me, my name is Jenny. I've been in nursing for about 7 years in the doctor's office setting, in the hospital, med-surg, and now currently work with older adults. The purpose of today's discussion is to discuss how elder abuse affects a very delicate population and what we as healthcare workers can do to identify those signs of abuse. Drobin defines elder abuse as any knowing, intentional, or negligent act by a family member or other caregiver that causes harm or serious risk of harm to an elderly person. The examples that they use are classified as sexual, emotional, physical, financial, material abuse, exploitation, or neglect. They also list hitting, social isolation, stealing, forging, enrolling in unneeded services, and improper use of your POA or power of attorney. Biblical verses that I was able to find to go along with elder abuse or neglectful situations consisted of Psalms 11:5, which reads, "The Lord examines the righteous, but the wicked, those who love violence, he hates with a passion." Also, on the flip side is Ephesians 4:15, "Instead, speaking in truth and love, we will grow to become in every respect the mature body of him who is the head, that is of Christ." Again, speaking in truth and in love. High-risk populations in the elderly consist of those that have Alzheimer's, dementia, any kind of memory impairment, depression, physical dependence, those that have amputations, rely on people for their health care, for their mobility, for their nutrition. Also substance abusers. Prevention: the National Center on Elder Abuse Administration on Aging lists the following preventative measures. For places of employment, for rehab facilities, nursing facilities, anywhere that houses the elderly population, or for caregivers going into the home, always doing a criminal background check to make sure there's nothing in the past that could mean it would be a potential abuser. Also, for the elderly population, if they have advanced planning, meaning they have a POA or power of attorney in place, a person that can act as their advocate. And also public awareness, education for healthcare workers and the general population on what consists of elder abuse. It always doesn't fall under physical, mental, or emotional abuse. There is other things such as financial. Policies and procedures. Every organization may have their own. Here at Century, I discussed with our healthcare worker, social worker, Shauna, that if we saw any abuseful situations, we would report it to our direct supervisor. Also, the National Administration on Aging lists an elder care locator, which is a really nice tool. What it is, you essentially type in the state that you live in, and it gives you every resource you would need to report a case of abuse. It also gives you the laws per state that apply to abuse. And as far as mandated reporting goes, as healthcare workers, we are on the front line. We may be able to identify a potential abusive situation before somebody else, maybe in a different field, isn't as educated on doing so. Not every state legally mandates workers to do so, but in Virginia, we are mandated reporters. And always for emergencies, call 911. If you ever see a patient that's in a harmful situation that you feel there needs to be some type of intervention now, don't hesitate to call 911. So in summary, we've discussed how elder abuse is defined, detected, and reported. The call to action would be, if you're ever in a situation and you see a potential abusive situation, an escalation in family, caregivers, or the patient acting differently. Maybe they're coming across as more depressed, or you see a lot of financial changes within the patient, or they voice any concerns never hesitate to report to the proper authorities, and you can stay anonymous when you're reporting. I have a vignette that I want to close with. Found it, it was in an article by Reed, and what I liked about this is it didn't explicitly have a physical abuse or an emotional or even mental abuse. It highlighted some other forms of abuse as well. Dr. X had cared for Mrs. Y for many years, including the last decade of her life, as she slowly descended into dementia. Hired as a caregiver, Miss Z became a constant presence in Mrs. Y's life, and Dr. X relied on her for essentially all communication about Mrs. Y. Although Dr. X had recorded Mrs. Y's severe dementia, he did not question Mrs. Z's salary increase and her subsequent purchase of a house with Mrs. Y's funds. Furthermore, having documented her strong desire to live her life in her home, he did not protest when Mrs. Z moved Mrs. Y into the new house. After Mrs. Y died, it was found that in her will had been amended in the previous year and that her entire estate had been left to Mrs. Z. At trial, Dr. X testified that although he did not believe Miss Y was competent, he believed Miss Z deserved the benefits that had come her way. He was rebuked by the court for having ignored his own findings. In an attempt to safeguard decisions from the undue influences of caregivers, such as Miss Z, special protections have been established by law to protect that certain population in this circumstance. So, thank you for listening today.